Welcome to Sideupt. Tonight, we're not here to comfort you. We're here to challenge everything you've been taught about being good. They told you to be kind, polite, obedient, but no one told you that these very virtues could be the chains keeping you weak. Imagine a man walking alone down a cold, abandoned road, his back turned to the crowd, his eyes sharp, unapologetic, unafraid. He is not trying to be liked. He is not asking for approval. He is reclaiming his power. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't want you to be agreeable. He wanted you to be free. He didn't care if you were accepted. He wanted you to become. In a world that rewards compliance and punishes defiance, what if the version of good you were taught is just a disguise, a mask to keep you tamed? What if your loyalty to this false goodness is the very thing that's holding you back from the person you were born to be? Tonight, we dive into Nietzsche's radical psychological insight, not the philosopher the textbooks tried to tame, but the thinker who dared to say, "Don't be good, be powerful." Let's ask the question you were never supposed to ask. What if everything you were taught to admire, meekness, patience, self-sacrifice, isn't virtue at all, but surrender? What if the pursuit of being liked is the silent killer of greatness? Nietzsche didn't believe in moral cages. He believed in the will to power, the inner fire that makes you walk alone, speak your truth, and shape your destiny, even if the world calls you dangerous for it. So, are you ready to peel back the layers of inherited morality? Are you brave enough to step off the safe path and walk the road where your true power lives? If so, stay with us, because this journey isn't for the faint of heart. This is for the ones who feel something stirring deep inside, something that refuses to be silenced any longer. Since childhood, you were taught to be good, not powerful, not honest, not free, just good. Good meant quiet, good meant agreeable, good meant sitting still, following rules, seeking approval, and never making anyone uncomfortable. But Friedrich Nietzsche looked into the soul of this so-called goodness and saw not virtue, but fear. He saw weakness, dressed up as morality. He wrote, "What is good? All that heightens the feeling of power in man, the will to power, power itself. What is bad? All that proceeds from weakness." In Nietzsche's world, what society calls good is often just a code word for what is tame, controllable, and docile. Look around. A child is praised when he stays quiet, obeys the teacher, keeps his hands folded neatly in his lap. But the same child is reprimanded for asking too many questions, for defying authority, for refusing to blend in. He is not being taught morality, he is being taught submission. He is being rewarded not for his strength of spirit, but for his capacity to comply. Nietzsche believed that this conditioning, the systematic rewarding of obedience and the quiet suppression of will, creates a society of half-alive beings, not individuals but echoes, not thinkers but followers. Goodness becomes a cage, invisible but unyielding, built from the fear of rejection, the terror of confrontation, the desperate need to be liked. And you, yes you, how much of your goodness is real? How much of it is rooted in your own chosen values? And how much of it is simply fear in disguise? You smile when you want to scream. You agree when you want to argue. You stay when every part of you wants to leave. Why? Because you've been trained to fear the consequences of being real. Society doesn't want your truth. It wants your compliance. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He called it slave morality, a moral system invented by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. The noble type of man, he wrote, experiences himself as value-creating. He does not need approval. He judges that which is harmful to him as harmful in itself. But the weak, those who lack the courage to act, the strength to confront, the will to rise, they had to invent a system where their cowardice became a virtue, where their fear of life was dressed up as humility, where turning the other cheek became morally superior to standing your ground. And so, goodness was born, not as a truth, but as a survival tactic, not as an absolute, but as a weapon of the powerless. It worked, it still works. We've built schools, churches, families, entire cultures around this myth, that to be good is to be safe, and to be safe is to be saved. But saved from what? From pain, from growth, from transformation. Nietzsche knew that true power requires risk, confrontation, solitude, and discomfort. He knew that to become who you truly are, you must first break away from who the world wants you to be. He didn't want you to fit in, he wanted you to evolve. So let's ask the question society never dares to ask. Is your goodness real, or is it a mask you wear to avoid being abandoned? When you say yes, is it from love, or is it from fear? When you keep quiet, is it out of wisdom or out of terror? How much of your daily behavior is shaped by your authentic will, and how much is just the residue of a lifetime spent chasing approval? Nietzsche would argue that most people are not good because they choose to be, but because they're too afraid to be anything else. Being good is easier. It earns applause, it avoids punishment, it keeps the waters still. But still waters don't lead to oceans, they lead to stagnation, and stagnation is the death of the soul. That is why Nietzsche's philosophy feels like a jolt to the system. It doesn't comfort, it awakens. It doesn't soothe, it challenges. He once said, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, it does not exist." And in that sentence, he broke the illusion. There is no universal right. There is only your way, your will, your path, and your power. But you cannot find that path while clinging to borrowed definitions of virtue. You cannot step into your power while clinging to the need to be liked. Nietzsche didn't write for the masses. He wrote for the few who are ready to stand alone, to question everything, to burn down the walls of inherited morality and build something truer from the ashes. If you've ever felt like you're suffocating in your own politeness, if you've ever wondered why your kindness feels more like a burden than a gift, if you've ever swallowed your truth just to avoid being seen as difficult, Nietzsche is speaking directly to you. He's not asking you to be cruel. He's asking you to be real, to be whole, to be powerful. Because goodness without truth is manipulation. Kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. And obedience without awareness is slavery. Look around. How many good people do you know who are miserable, who are exhausted from people-pleasing, from self-silencing, from carrying 1,000 unspoken no's in their chest every day? That is not morality. That is martyrdom, and it serves no one. Nietzsche believed that the world does not need more obedient souls. It needs more awakened ones. People who are willing to live with intensity, to love with courage, to speak with conviction, even if it means being seen as dangerous. Because sometimes the most moral thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the most virtuous act is rebellion. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give the world is your refusal to conform. So next time you find yourself biting your tongue, shrinking your voice, denying your instincts just to preserve your image as a good person, pause. Ask yourself, is this who I am, or is this who I was trained to be? That pause, that crack in the pattern, is where your power begins. That's where you stop being good and start becoming real. And when you are real, you are untouchable, because your worth is no longer held hostage by other people's opinions. Your identity is no longer dependent on their approval, and your soul is no longer for sale. Nietzsche didn't want you to be good. He wanted you to be awake, alive, fierce, not because it's easy, but because it's true. And in a world drowning in shallow niceness, your truth is revolutionary. Your truth is your power is your path, and your path is waiting. So if Nietzsche dismantled the illusion of goodness, exposed it as a quiet pact with fear, what did he offer in return? In the ruins of false virtue, he planted a seed, something raw, real, and deeply human. He called it the will to power. Not the will to dominate others, not the hunger for control, but the inner pulse that moves you to express who you truly are, no matter the cost. It is the drive to overcome, to transform, to rise, not just above the world, but above yourself. Will to power is not about loudness. It is not about ego or force. It's a silent revolution that begins inside. The moment you decide to live without masks, without apologies, without asking permission to exist. It is the refusal to shrink, the audacity to become. You don't change when you are loved, Nietzsche might have whispered if he stood beside you today. You change when you finally tell the truth. To yourself, about yourself. That is will to power. It is standing in front of a broken mirror, seeing every shattered part of yourself and not flinching. It is reaching out with your bare hand and breaking the chains you forged around your own potential. It is the quiet rebellion of choosing authenticity over approval, growth over comfort, and power over performance. In this sense, Nietzsche was less a philosopher and more a surgeon of the soul, cutting through the layers of false identity, exposing the rotting beliefs that keep you small. But this path he offered was not gentle. It demands everything from you. It demands you confront the parts of yourself you've buried, the anger, the jealousy, the fear, the ambition you were told was dangerous. In the language of Jung, it is facing your shadow. And the shadow is not evil, it is exiled potential. It is everything you were told not to be that still lives inside you, waiting. The will to power is the key that unlocks the door to that dark room. And in that room, you find the parts of yourself you thought you had to kill to be good. But now you see them differently. You realize that your fire is not a flaw, it's fuel. Your desire to speak, to lead, to create, to break the silence, that is not selfishness, that is soul. That is life demanding to be lived fully, not filtered through the lens of social acceptance. Society told you to wear the mask. Will to power tells you to take it off. You were taught to label parts of yourself as bad, simply because they made others uncomfortable. But Nietzsche asks, who defined these labels? Who profits from your self-suppression? Who benefits when you live in fear of your own intensity? The answer is simple: systems of control. The world fears the individual who is no longer dependent on its praise, the one who no longer needs to be seen as good to move forward. That individual cannot be manipulated. That individual is free. And freedom, real freedom, begins inside. It begins the moment you stop running from your own complexity, when you no longer try to fix the parts of you that were never broken, only buried. Nietzsche believed that life itself is the expression of power, not domination, but creation. And creation only happens when you stop hiding, when you stop editing your soul. Imagine a face, peeling away a mask it has worn for years, not with shame, but with reverence. That's will to power. Imagine a hand breaking its own chains, not in rage, but with calm determination. That's will to power. Imagine standing before the shattered mirror of your past and choosing not to rebuild it, but to walk away, unafraid, into a future shaped by your own will. That is will to power. And once you touch it, you can never go back. You can never again pretend that smallness is safety. You can never again pretend that obedience is peace. Because you've tasted something deeper, the clarity of your own voice, the weight of your own truth, the strength that comes not from being accepted, but from being honest. This is the transformation Nietzsche offered. Not salvation, not moral purity, but awakening. An awakening doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming real. It means realizing that good and evil are not universal. They are contextual, personal, ever-changing. What is good for your growth may appear evil to those invested in your stagnation. What is evil to the status quo may be liberation for your soul. So stop asking, is this good? Start asking, is this true? Does this bring me closer to my fullest self, or pull me back into the cage? Reclaim your own definitions. Redraw your moral lines, because morality that is inherited is not morality, it is programming. And Nietzsche's entire philosophy was about deprogramming the soul, about returning to the raw question, what do I want to become? Not what should I be, not what do they expect, but who am I when no one is watching, when no one is rewarding me, when no one is punishing me? That is the question will to power dares you to answer. And the answer won't come from books or dogma or applause. It will rise from within, like a fire, like a whisper you've been ignoring your whole life. And once you hear it, your life begins, truly. Nietzsche never promised that this path would be easy. He warned that it would be lonely, dangerous, full of inner battles. But he also knew that it was the only path worth walking. Because in the end, your life is not about being remembered as good. It is about being remembered as someone who lived. Fully, fiercely, truthfully. The will to power is not a doctrine. It's not a system. It's not something to memorize. It is something to be. It is in every no you say to what no longer serves you, in every yes you say to your own voice, in every time you choose depth over comfort, reality over illusion. So stand now, wherever you are, and look inward. Ask, where have I been silencing myself? Where have I been good instead of true? Where have I bowed out of fear when I should have stepped forward in fire? You will find the answers not in theory, but in memory, in moments you traded your truth for acceptance. And when you reclaim those moments, when you rewrite them with courage, you begin the work of becoming. This is your invitation, not to be moral, not to be praised, but to be whole, to be powerful, to live, not as a reflection, but as a force, not as a product, but as a presence, not as someone who pleases, but someone who is, because the world does not need another smiling shadow. It needs your light, untamed, unedited, unforgettable. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, pause for a moment, not to conclude, but to begin. Because what you've just heard isn't just philosophy, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, maybe for the first time, you saw the outlines of your real self, not the version shaped by fear or by the need to be accepted, but the one that has been waiting quietly beneath the surface, asking not for praise, but for permission to exist without apology. The message is clear. Being good is not the goal. Being real is. Being free is. Being powerful, not over others, but within yourself, is what the higher self longs for. Nietzsche never asked you to impress anyone. He asked you to become someone. And that becoming does not begin with applause. It begins in silence, in the quiet decision to stop performing, to stop conforming, to stop asking who you should be, and start listening to who you already are. Because real change doesn't come from the world approving of you. It comes from you approving of your truth, no matter who walks away because of it. That is where the real strength lies. That is where transformation begins. So ask yourself again, with honesty, with courage, have you been good, or have you just been afraid? Have you been accepted, or have you simply been edited? The time has come to stop seeking labels and start forging your own meaning. The time has come to redefine what strength looks like, sounds like, feels like, not through borrowed values but through lived truth. And let this stay with you. True goodness is not demanded. It cannot be mimicked. It does not seek applause. It radiates from within. And true power, it's not about being louder. It's about being rooted so deeply in who you are that nothing can shake you. If you saw yourself in these words, if something stirred inside you that can no longer be ignored, then you already know. You belong here. Not in a crowd, not in a mold, but in a space where depth matters more than image. At Psi Depth, we don't chase the surface, we dive beneath it. So if you're ready to go further, to think harder, to live deeper, then stay with us. We have only just begun.